Ski Air Mix is an arcade-focused winter sports ski racing game that was released for the PlayStation originally in Japan in 1998 and later added to the European region in September 2000. And in that year it would be published by Midas Interactive and sold as a budget title for the system. The game sees players take control of 4 different distinct characters, both male and female, each with their own character attributes and skill features. It gives you the ability to also use different pairs of skis and tools that contribute to different aesthetics that give you either max speed, performance, stability, response. These elements will be very typical in arcade games. If we go all the way back to the early days of the PlayStation and even arcade titles, if we look at games like Ridge Racer, even Motor Racer, to name but a few, you could have access to a variety of different types of vehicles or bikes, cars even, but each vehicle in question also had different capabilities. Some would have more grip, which meant that they could turn and have better control and handling physics, while others would have less grip and wouldn't have the same turn radius, so that you couldn't get round corners the same way. So in that case, for example, in Ridge Racer, you would have to implement and utilise the drift mechanic features in order to take full advantage of those cars that lacked those qualities, whereas other cars that had better handling, you didn't need to use them. So you had to pick a different characteristic that would suit your own specific play style, and Ski Air Mix is no different in that regard. And the game does offer up different modes, with like a time attack mode where you race against the clock, a versus mode where you can play against your mates, and even just a single player mode where you can traverse against all of the other tracks in the game, which there are 4 in total, that consist of different regions from Italy to Austria, Japan, Canada, and then a hidden one with Switzerland. And each event requires players to race downhill and reach the finish line before the clock runs out, and also to defeat other opponents. So you will always be faced with constant challenges, as you'll have loads of obstacles to avoid and winding paths to get around, but even jumps and gaps that you have to jump over or avoid to stop you from falling off ledges and so forth, so that you can maintain your time, so that you can complete each section and complete the race overall before the timer runs out. You will also gain various different points depending on skills or jumps and different move sets that you can utilise as you come over jumps and hurdles. So once you acquire points and you get to the end of the race, you are then brought to a ranking screen, which will then determine the score, so you can try and place on the leaderboards. And you can also have the option to have like a ghost replay, so you can race against another version of your previous time in order to try and beat it and update it. So it does have some distinct attributes and aspects. It's definitely reflective of an arcade title, and it's quite simple to pick up and play. It's not overly complex or difficult in terms of what it's trying to do. Now, it is challenging in terms of the environmental hazards and trying to adjust to certain dynamics of the track layouts, but overall it's very forgiving and is a fun title in short bursts. But again, it is an arcade game, so you won't really find yourself playing this for long periods anyway. Now, even aside from those features, there is very little information regarding the background of this game that you can find online. From what I have been able to find, that there was a review that was in one of the official PlayStation magazines back in the day, more predominantly in the European region, and it got very low scores, so reviewers clearly didn't think much about the game. They just considered it to be just a basic budget entry title, and for many that's probably all they'll see it as. But again, it's an arcade title, there's nothing fancy about it. It did come out at a time, however, when many of these titles were starting to disappear. They weren't considered as popular back in the day, because we had access to more mainstream titles, more well-equipped games with more features, attributes and aesthetics, even visually, gameplay mechanics, modes. So this game would have found it difficult to stand out in that regard, and I think genuinely the reason why this game would have fallen into that realm of obscurity is down to timing when the game was released. I think because of its style, this game would have been more suited to the early months or years of the likes of the console or the 32-bit era. If this game had to been released, say, in early 1995 or whenever the PlayStation was released around that time period, if it had been seen within the first few months of the console's release, this game would have done quite well. It would have appealed to that nature, because it was a lot of those arcade games that were being released around that time, and it would have fitted right in with that aesthetic. especially for players who were looking for something a little bit different. But unfortunately, it just came out at a time when we already had games like the Cool Border series, you had MTV Sports, snowboarding games, you even had the Tony Hawk's games, even though that's a skateboarding game, but you had all these extreme sports games that were literally just killing it in terms of popularity. So it left very little room for games like this to really appeal to a mass market, unfortunately. But it is what it is. That's just a result of time, and that's just the way games were back then. A lot of it was down to timing, which would result either in their success or their failure. And it's not necessarily around the actual game itself, as the game is fun to play. When you pick it up, it does have that arcade aesthetic, and I found it to be a pleasant experience and enjoyable at that when I played it. Yes, it is relatively short, but I didn't find it overly difficult. If anything, I found it a lot easier to get into compared to other games of its type that I have experienced on the system. It was definitely one of the more enjoyable experiences, I must admit. So it doesn't take away from the fact it's not a bad game. I think it is a game that is worth a try. Again, like I said, it just is a matter of timing with this. Had it been released early on in the PlayStation's lifespan, yeah, I think it would have done a lot better. But it is what it is, but I still think it's something that you should try out on your own, so that way then you can have your own distinct opinion of it. I don't think you'll find it to be a bad game. I think many of you will probably enjoy it if you haven't played it already, and if you have, I would love to know your experience of this game and what you think of it overall. Do you agree with what I mentioned in this video, or do you enjoy these type of games in general, or would you like to play something that is a little bit different? Or if you have done, what do you think of it overall? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other unique, quirky and rare style extreme sports games like this that were also released on the PlayStation, then you can check out the playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.